Camp Blackwater Marine Training Facility towered above the Carolina pines like an iron fortress, its sprawling shooting ranges stretching nearly a kilometer under skies that shifted between storm cloud gray and brilliant blue. This wasn't just any military installation. It was the crucible where America's most elite combat units came to prove themselves against impossible standards. Lieutenant Morgan Hayes stepped from her battered pickup truck, boots crunching on the gravel, as she surveyed the facility that had haunted her dreams for years. At 34, she moved with the calculated precision of someone who had seen more combat than classroom training, her faded BDU jacket and worn cargo pants standing in stark contrast to the crisp uniform surrounding her. In one hand, she carried a weathered rifle case, its leather surface cracked and peeling, held together with duct tape and stubbornness. The annual marksmanship qualification event had drawn top shooters from every branch of service, but this year was different. After budget constraints threatened several veteran support programs, the brass had agreed to a special challenge. If a representative from the Veterans Outreach Program could outshoot the Marines' best snipers, funding would be guaranteed for another 5 years. For Morgan, this wasn't just a competition. It was a mission to save the program that had saved her life after 3 tours in Afghanistan left her with both physical and invisible scars. Veterans from across the country had nominated Morgan for this impossible task, and now she stood alone, facing the most elite shooting teams the military could assemble. She knew what they saw. A woman past her prime, carrying outdated equipment, presuming to challenge active duty Marines with state-of-the-art training and technology. Their eyes followed her with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal as she made her way toward the registration tent. Major William Blackwood stood near the entrance to the primary firing range, his uniform immaculate, his posture ramrod straight. At 45, he had overseen Camp Blackwater's elite sniper training program for 7 years, producing marksmen whose accuracy was legendary even among special forces. His presence commanded instant respect from the young Marines who moved around him like planets orbiting a star. When his gaze fell on Morgan, however, his expression shifted to one of barely concealed amusement. "Civilian check-in is at the main gate," he called out, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "This area is restricted to qualification participants." Morgan continued walking, her eyes focused on the registration table ahead. She'd faced Taliban fighters during sandstorms in Kandahar. A condescending officer wasn't going to derail her mission. The veterans who depended on the outreach program's counseling services, housing assistance, and medical support were counting on her. Some of them had been her brothers and sisters in arms, people who'd had her back when bullets were flying. She wouldn't let them down now. The morning sun glinted off the high-tech rifles being unpacked by the Marine shooting teams. Cutting-edge weapons with advanced optics, custom triggers, and precision-engineered parts that cost more than Morgan's truck. Meanwhile, her rifle case held something from another era entirely, a weapon that would soon become either the subject of the day's most enduring joke or its most unbelievable legend. As Morgan approached the registration table, the young corporal, manning it, looked up with obvious confusion. His eyes darted from her worn BDUs to the tattered rifle case, then to his clipboard and back again. The embroidered name on his uniform read, "Diaz," and he couldn't have been more than 23. "Ma'am, this area is restricted to competition participants," he repeated, echoing Major Blackwood's dismissal. "Veteran observers can watch from the designated viewing area up the hill." "I am a participant," Morgan replied, sliding across her authorization papers signed by General Patterson himself. "Lieutenant Morgan Hayes, Veterans Outreach Program Representative." Corporal Diaz examined the papers with growing disbelief, his eyebrows climbing higher with each line he read. "This must be some kind of mistake," he muttered, looking around, as if seeking someone to confirm his assessment. The special demonstration is a live-fire exercise against the recon team's top marksman. I'm aware of the parameters, Corporal. Morgan's voice remained even, betraying none of the anxiety churning beneath her calm exterior. She'd been fighting versions of this battle since entering basic training 15 years ago. The constant need to prove herself in a world that assumed her inadequacy before she'd fired a single shot. By now, a small crowd had gathered around. The registration table, drawn by the unusual sight of a woman in faded fatigues, attempting to register for the elite competition. Among them stood Captain James Reynolds, commander of the Marine Force Recon Sniper Unit that had dominated the qualification event for the past 3 years. His custom M40A7 sniper rifle, the latest military-issue weapon with aftermarket modifications, was slung casually over one shoulder like an extension of his perfectly pressed uniform. "So this is our special challenger?" Reynolds asked, making no attempt to hide his amusement. His voice carried just enough volume to ensure the growing audience could hear every word. "I thought they'd at least send someone from active duty." A ripple of laughter spread through the onlookers. Morgan recognized the tactic, public humiliation, as a form of psychological warfare designed to unsettle opponents before the competition even began. She'd used similar techniques herself in Afghanistan, though never against fellow Americans. "The paperwork appears to be in order, sir," Corporal Diaz said reluctantly, stamping Morgan's entry form and handing her a competitor's badge. "Lieutenant Hayes is authorized for the special challenge match at 1400 hours. Captain Reynolds leaned, in examining Morgan's rifle case with theatrical interest. "What are you packing in there, Lieutenant? Something special from the Veterans Museum?" Before Morgan could respond, Staff Sergeant Alicia Martinez stepped forward. Unlike the others, her expression held curiosity rather than derision. At 30, she was one of the few women on the base's shooting instruction team. Her qualification: scores consistently in the top percentile. "Let's see what you're working with," Martinez said, gesturing to the case. With methodical calm, Morgan placed her case on the table and unzipped it. The crowd leaned forward expectantly, and when she revealed its contents, the reaction was immediate. Some laughed outright. Others exchanged glances of disbelief. One young Marine whispered audibly to another, "Is that a freaking M14? My grandfather carried one of those in Vietnam." Inside the case lay an M14 rifle that had indeed seen service in Vietnam, though Morgan had modified it extensively over the years. The wooden stock bore the scars of decades of use, but the metal gleamed with the unmistakable sheen of meticulous maintenance. Unlike the modern tactical rifles surrounding her, with their polymer components and digital sighting systems, Morgan's weapon was a throwback to an era when marksmanship relied more on skill than technology. "You're planning to outshoot recon with that relic?" Captain Reynolds asked, no longer bothering to hide his contempt. "The M14 was phased out of frontline service before most of us were born." "This particular relic has never let me down," Morgan replied, her voice steady as she ran her fingers along the worn stock with the familiarity of an old friendship. "Some tools improve with age and experience." "Like the shooter," Staff Sergeant Martinez commented quietly, earning a sharp glance from Captain Reynolds. As Morgan began the process of checking in her weapon with the range safety officer, whispers circulated through the gathering crowd. Marines and Army personnel alike were placing informal bets on how badly she would lose, not whether she would lose, but by how much. The veterans' program funding that hung in the balance of this competition seemed all but forfeited in their eyes, sacrificed to what they perceived as a publicity stunt rather than a serious challenge. Only Staff Sergeant Martinez seemed to reserve judgment, watching thoughtfully as Morgan handled her vintage rifle with the practiced ease that comes only from thousands of hours of familiarity. "There's a story behind that weapon," she remarked to no one in particular, and I'm guessing there's one behind the shooter too. The mandatory equipment inspection was conducted with the efficiency of a military operation, if that operation was designed to expose weakness and invite failure. Chief Warrant Officer Thomas Gaines stood behind the inspection table like a judge at a court-martial, his silver-streaked hair cropped close to his scalp, his eyes missing nothing. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Peterson, the naval attaché, assigned to document the competition for the Pentagon's Budget Committee, waited with clipboard in hand. Morgan approached the table carrying her M14, now fully assembled and gleaming despite its age. The crowd had swelled considerably, word having spread about the veteran with the antique who thought she could outshoot Force Recon's finest. Phones were out, recording what many expected to be a humiliating technical disqualification before the competition even began. Equipment inspection, Chief Gaines announced unnecessarily, as if Morgan might have mistaken the large sign above the table reading Mandatory Weapon Inspection. All firearms must meet current military qualification, standards for accuracy and safety. Lieutenant Commander Peterson stepped forward, her inspection theatrical and unnecessarily thorough. She hefted Morgan's M14 like it was a museum piece that might contaminate her hands. "This doesn't even have a modern optic system," she commented, loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "The standard issue is now the Schmidt and Bender PMII with digital reticle adjustment. The rifle is functional and meets qualification requirements," Morgan said quietly, her voice steady despite the growing murmurs from the spectators. "We'll be the judge of that," Chief Gaines replied, deliberately checking the weapon's bore with exaggerated care. "When was the last time this firing pin was replaced? During the Cold War." Captain Reynolds stood at the edge of the inspection area, arms crossed over his chest, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Beside him, several members of his recon team watched the proceedings with barely concealed amusement. "Careful with the antique," called out Sergeant Kyle Wilson, the youngest of Reynolds' team. "It might be worth something to collectors if it doesn't fall apart first." Chief Gaines placed Morgan's ammunition on a digital scale, measuring each round with excessive precision. "These hand-loaded, they don't match standard issue specifications." "They're match-grade rounds, sir," Morgan explained. "Custom loaded for this specific rifle. They meet all safety requirements and fall within competition parameters." "Rules are rules," Lieutenant Commander Peterson interjected, checking her. "Watch with theatrical precision. 5 minutes for equipment check. Clock started when we began." She made no move to speed up the obviously delayed inspection, as Chief Gaines continued examining every inch of Morgan's rifle with unnecessary scrutiny. Morgan stood perfectly still, her face betraying nothing. Years of combat operations had taught her that showing frustration only gave opponents power. Inside, however, her mind calculated contingencies. If they disqualified her weapon on a technicality, she'd need to appeal directly to General Patterson, which would delay the competition, and potentially turn what was supposed to be a fair challenge into a public relations nightmare for both sides. "The firing mechanism shows excessive wear," Chief Gaines announced, though Morgan knew perfectly well that the internal components had been replaced just last month. "There's a safety concern here." From the sidelines, Staff Sergeant Martinez had been watching with growing disapproval. She stepped forward, her own expertise as a weapons instructor evident in her bearing. "Sir, with respect, I'd like to examine the weapon as well, since I'll be one of the safety officers on the range during the competition." Chief Gaines hesitated, then reluctantly handed the rifle to Martinez, who conducted a swift, professional inspection. "The firing mechanism is within tolerance, sir," she reported formally. "The safety functions properly, the barrel shows no signs of dangerous wear, and the ammunition meets competition standards. I see no reason for disqualification." A flash of annoyance crossed Chief Gaines's face, but with another officer contradicting his assessment publicly, he had little choice. Very well. Weapon passes inspection, though I'm noting my concerns in the official record. Lieutenant Commander Peterson seemed disappointed as she stamped Morgan's entry form. Proceed to the preparation area. Competition begins in 45 minutes. As Morgan reclaimed her rifle, she caught Staff Sergeant Martinez's eye and nodded, slightly in thanks. Martinez returned the gesture with professional discretion. You know that relic is still going to embarrass you on the range, Captain Reynolds commented as Morgan passed. My team has been training with the latest systems. For years, your nostalgia project doesn't stand a chance. Morgan secured her rifle and continued toward the preparation area, ignoring the continued commentary from Reynolds' team. Behind her, she heard someone say, $50 says she doesn't hit within 5 MOA of center mass. I'll take that bet. And double it if she starts crying when she loses, another voice added. The mockery continued, but Morgan had stopped listening. In her mind, she was already on the firing line, feeling the familiar wood grain of the stock against her cheek, sensing the wind's subtle messages across her skin. Let them talk. Let them bet. Let them underestimate her and her rifle. There. Mistake would become her advantage, just as it had in so many other battles throughout her life. The midday sun beat down on Camp Blackwater's precision range with unforgiving intensity. Heat waves rippled above the asphalt, distorting the distant targets that stood like sentinels against the earthen backstop. The competition area had been transformed into a makeshift arena, with bleachers erected for military personnel and a small VIP section for the visiting Pentagon officials whose decision on veteran program funding would be influenced by today's results. Morgan sat alone in the preparation area, methodically cleaning her M14 one final time, though it was already immaculate. The familiar ritual centered her, each movement precise and purposeful. She'd learned long ago that weapon maintenance wasn't just about function, it was meditation, a way to clear the mind before action. Her fingers traced each scratch on the wooden stock, each mark a memory from battles fought across 3 continents. Across the prep area, Captain Reynolds' recon team performed their own pre-competition. Rituals with considerably more theatrics. Their high-tech rifles, modified M40A7s with advanced thermal scopes, carbon fiber barrels, and custom triggers, were displayed with deliberate prominence. The team's equipment cases bore the Force Recon insignia and were lined up with military precision, creating a stark contrast to Morgan's single weathered case. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Major Blackwood over the PA system, his voice booming across the range, "welcome to the annual Marksmanship Qualification Event, Special Challenge Edition." The crowd's conversation died down as Blackwood continued. Today's exhibition features the Marine Corps' Elite Force Recon Sniper Unit, led by Captain James Reynolds, facing a special challenger representing the Veterans Outreach Program. At this, all eyes turned to Morgan, who continued her preparations without acknowledging the attention. "The stakes today are significant," Blackwood explained. "The Pentagon's Budget Committee is evaluating funding allocations for the next fiscal year. A strong showing by the veterans representative could secure critical resources for programs supporting our former service members." In the VIP section, a gray-haired man in an expensive suit leaned toward his aide. This was Congressman Howard Mitchell, chairman of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, whose signature could either save or doom dozens of veteran support initiatives across the country. "Is this some kind of joke?" he muttered, gesturing toward Morgan. "They sent one woman with an outdated rifle against an entire recon team?" His aide, a former Army captain, shrugged uncomfortably. "General Patterson authorized it, sir. Apparently, she was specifically requested by the Veterans Coalition." "Well, this should be quick at least," Mitchell replied, checking his watch impatiently. Back in the preparation area, Sergeant Wilson had approached Morgan, his curiosity finally overcoming his initial mockery. "That's a Vietnam-era weapon, right?" he asked, studying the M14 with genuine interest despite himself. "My grandfather had one, said it was reliable but heavy as hell." Morgan nodded without looking up from her work. "First adopted in 1959. Standard issue until the M16 replaced it in the mid-60s, though special units use them much longer." "So why stick with something so outdated?" Wilson pressed. "Modern systems offer better accuracy, lighter weight, advanced optics. Sometimes the older tools teach you better fundamentals," Morgan replied, finally meeting his gaze. "When you don't have technology compensating for weaknesses, you learn not to have those weaknesses." Wilson seemed ready to ask another question when Captain Reynolds called him back to their area with a sharp whistle. "Don't fraternize with the competition, Wilson," Reynolds barked, "especially when the competition is already beaten before the first shot." Morgan returned to her preparations, but not before noticing Staff Sergeant Martinez observing the exchange from nearby. The female instructor's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes suggested she understood more than she let on. "Attention, competitors," came the announcement. "Please proceed to your assigned firing positions. First course of fire will commence in 5 minutes. Morgan rose, slung her rifle across her back, and walked toward the firing line with unhurried confidence. Behind her, whispers followed like shadows. "This is going to be embarrassing," one junior officer commented to another. "Maybe they should have a medic standing by for when she realizes what she's gotten herself into," replied his companion with a chuckle. The bleachers were now filled with spectators, many holding phones to record what they anticipated would be a spectacular failure. Someone had created a makeshift scoreboard with a whiteboard, where unofficial side bets were being tracked. The heading read, "Veteran Wipeout Countdown," with wagers on how badly Morgan would lose. Captain Reynolds took position at the center, firing station, his team arrayed on either side of him in a display of unified precision. Their rifles gleamed in the sunlight, a testament to modern military technology. By contrast, Morgan was assigned to the end position, slightly separated from the Marines as if to emphasize her outsider status. The range officer approached with final instructions. "First course of fire, precision targeting at 300 meters, 10 rounds. Scoring will be based on shot grouping and proximity to bullseye. Standard military qualification parameters apply." As Morgan settled into position, removing her worn field jacket to reveal a faded tank top underneath, she became aware of a hush falling over the nearest spectators. The reason became clear as their eyes fixed on her exposed right arm, where a network of burn scars stretched from her wrist to her shoulder, the unmistakable signature of an IED blast. "Jesus," someone whispered, "she's seen some serious action." Morgan ignored the comments, focusing instead on her breathing as she prepared for the first course of fire. The familiar weight of the M14 settled against her shoulder like a friend welcoming her home. "Shooters ready," called the range officer. "You may commence firing when the buzzer sounds." The buzzer shattered the tense silence, and the competition began with the crisp crack of precision rifles. Captain Reynolds and his recon team fired with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized from countless hours of training together. The rapid-fire digital displays behind each target showed their shots clustering near center mass, impressive groupings that drew appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Morgan's approach was noticeably different. While the Marines fired their rounds in quick succession, she took her time between shots, her breathing pattern measured and deliberate. Her body remained perfectly still, except for the minimal movement required to work the M14's action. Where the modern rifles barely shifted in their shooters' hands thanks to advanced recoil compensation, Morgan's weapon kicked against her shoulder with each shot, requiring her to reacquire her sight picture every time. "Taking her sweet time," commented one of the army observers with a smirk, "probably stalling the inevitable embarrassment." "Old rifle, old tactics," agreed his companion. "These days it's all about rapid target acquisition and engagement. In the VIP section, Congressman Mitchell watched through binoculars with growing impatience. Is she even hitting the target? I can't see any impacts through these. Lieutenant Commander Peterson, who had joined the dignitaries, replied with poorly concealed satisfaction, "We'll know when they call ceasefire and check the targets. But given the outdated equipment she's using, I wouldn't expect much precision." The final shots echoed across the range, and the range officer called out, "Ceasefire, ceasefire, clear and secure your weapons. Range officials will now inspect targets." As the officials moved downrange, Captain Reynolds turned to his team with confident satisfaction. "Good shooting, Marines. Textbook performance." The atmosphere among the spectators had the festive quality of spectators witnessing a foregone conclusion. Unofficial scorekeepers were already updating their whiteboards, calculating payouts for the various side bets placed against Morgan's performance. When the range officials returned with the paper targets, they posted them on a large display board for all to see. The recon team's targets showed tight groupings near center mass, professional marksmanship by any standard. The crowd applauded appreciatively as each Marine's score was announced. Captain Reynolds, score 96, called out Chief Gaines, holding up a target with an impressive cluster of holes near the bullseye. Sergeant Wilson, score 94. Corporal Rodriguez, score 95. The announcements continued, each score in the mid to high 90s, reflecting the elite status of the Force Recon snipers. Captain Reynolds stood with arms crossed, his expression smug as his team's excellence was confirmed for the audience. Then came Morgan's target. Chief Gaines hesitated visibly before holding it up, his expression difficult to read. "Lieutenant Hayes," he began, then paused. The crowd leaned forward collectively, many anticipating the moment of humiliation they'd been waiting for since Morgan first appeared with her outdated rifle. "Score 98, Chief Gaines finally announced. A confused silence fell over the spectators. Someone laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke or an error. "Let me see that," Major Blackwood demanded, stepping forward to examine Morgan's target himself. The paper revealed a tight cluster of holes, all within the innermost ring of the bullseye, where the Marines' shots had formed good groupings near center mass. Morgan's formed an almost perfect clover pattern directly through the center of the target, the kind of grouping typically seen only in shooting competitions, not field qualifications. "That can't be right," Captain Reynolds protested, striding forward to inspect the target himself. "The M14 doesn't have the accuracy capability to outshoot our modified M40s. "The rifle doesn't shoot itself, Captain," Morgan commented quietly. Still in position at her firing station, her M14 now secured and pointed downrange. From the stands, murmurs of confusion spread like ripples in a pond. The unofficial scoreboard remained unmarked as its keeper stared in disbelief at the displayed targets. Staff Sergeant Martinez moved closer to examine Morgan's target, her professional eye measuring the shot grouping. "Half-inch spread at 300 meters, she announced, loud enough for nearby personnel to hear. "That's exceptional marksmanship by any standard." In the VIP section, Congressman Mitchell lowered his binoculars, his expression transforming from impatience to intrigue. "Well, now," he muttered to his aide, "this just got interesting." Lieutenant Commander Peterson appeared flustered, flipping through her clipboard as if searching for an explanation or rule violation she could cite. Finding none, she announced stiffly, "Results from the first course of fire. Veterans Outreach. Representative leads by 2 points. Next course will commence in 15 minutes. As Morgan rose from her position to prepare for the next round, she caught Captain Reynolds staring at her with a mixture of disbelief and newfound wariness. The easy confidence had vanished from his posture, replaced by the tense focus of a competitor who suddenly realized he was in an actual contest. "Beginner's luck," Sergeant Wilson suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or a statistical anomaly," added Corporal Rodriguez. No way she maintains that precision through the more advanced courses. Captain Reynolds said nothing, but his gaze followed Morgan as she moved to the preparation area. For the first time, he was looking at her not as an amusing diversion, but as a legitimate threat. In the bleachers, the tone of conversation had shifted noticeably. The mockery had quieted, replaced by speculative whispers and reassessments. Several phone cameras that had been recording in anticipation of a humiliating failure remained trained on Morgan, but now with a different purpose, capturing what might become an unexpected upset. "Who exactly is this woman?" someone asked aloud, a question that seemed to echo the collective curiosity that had replaced the earlier derision. The 15-minute break stretched with palpable tension as competitors and spectators alike adjusted to the unexpected results of the first round. Morgan sat alone at a small table in the preparation area, methodically checking her ammunition and cleaning her rifle's action with the same unhurried precision she'd demonstrated on the firing line. Her face revealed nothing, no pride in her surprise performance, no satisfaction at the stunned reaction surrounding her. She might have been preparing for a routine training exercise rather than the second phase of a high-stakes competition that had just been turned on its head. Across the preparation area, Captain Reynolds had gathered his team into a tight huddle, their conversation intense and purposeful. Gone was the casual confidence from earlier. In its place, a focused determination normally reserved for actual combat operations. Reynolds occasionally glanced toward Morgan, his expression calculating, as he recalibrated his approach. "The next course is moving targets at variable distances," he reminded his team, voice lowered. "That's where the limitations of her outdated system will show. The M14 wasn't designed for rapid target transitions. Our optics give us a decisive advantage there." His team nodded in agreement, though their earlier cockiness had been replaced by professional focus. They were no longer simply showing off for an audience. They were competing against a legitimate threat. In the spectator area, the atmosphere had transformed completely. Where before there had been dismissive laughter and casual side conversations, now there was the hushed anticipation of witnessing something potentially historic. The impromptu betting board was being hurriedly updated, odds recalculated, and new wagers placed. "I heard she served with 5th Special Forces in Afghanistan," one staff sergeant whispered to his companions. "3 tours before transferring to trained snipers at Fort Bragg." "That's not what I heard," countered a master sergeant from the logistics division. "Word is, she was part of a classified joint task force operating behind enemy lines, the kind of unit that doesn't exist on paper." "Either way," added a third, "that first-round grouping wasn't luck. Nobody shoots like that without thousands of hours behind a rifle." Staff Sergeant Martinez had been listening to these conversations with quiet interest. Now she approached Morgan's table, carrying 2 bottles of water. She offered one to Morgan. Without comment. "Thanks," Morgan said, accepting the water, but continuing her methodical preparations. Martinez settled into the chair opposite her, studying both the woman and her weapon with professional curiosity. "That rifle has a story," she observed. "Not many people stick with the M14 when there are more advanced options available." Morgan paused, her hands resting on the worn wooden stock. For a moment it seemed she might not respond, but then she nodded slightly. "It belonged to my father," she said, her voice matter-of-fact rather than sentimental. "Master Sergeant Frank Hayes, 5th Special Forces. 2 tours in Vietnam, then Desert Storm. He taught me to shoot with this rifle when I was 12, out behind our place in Kentucky. Said if I could master this, I could handle any weapon the military might give me." Martinez nodded, understanding the significance. "He must have been a hell of a shooter himself." "The best I ever knew," Morgan confirmed, her fingers tracing. A set of initials carved into the stock. "He passed 5 years ago. Cancer from Agent Orange exposure finally caught up with him. His last words to me were about this rifle. "Take care of it," he said, "and it'll take care of you when nothing else will." Before Martinez could respond, Major Blackwood's voice boomed over the PA system. "Competitors, report to your stations. Second course of fire will commence in 3 minutes. Morgan secured her cleaning supplies and rose, slinging the M14 across her back with practiced ease. Martinez stood as well, maintaining a professional distance but offering a respectful nod. "Good shooting, Lieutenant," she said simply. The second course of fire presented a fundamentally different challenge from the first. Where the initial round had tested pure precision at a fixed distance, this phase evaluated adaptability and quick target acquisition, skills that heavily favored modern optics systems and lightweight tactical rifles. Course 2, Moving Target Engagement, announced Chief Gaines. Targets will appear at variable distances between 100 and 400 meters, visible for approximately 3 seconds each. 10 targets total, scoring based on hit-miss ratio and accuracy within target zones. As competitors took their positions, the differences in their equipment became even more apparent. Captain Reynolds and his team adjusted their advanced scopes, setting up ballistic computers that would calculate trajectory adjustments on the fly. Their rifles featured bipods, stabilizing grips, and electronic sight systems that could track moving objects. Morgan's setup was comparatively primitive. Just her M14 with its iron sights, a simple leather sling, and a small spotting scope on a tripod beside her position. Where the Marines had technological solutions, she had only her skill, experience, and the rifle that had become an extension of herself through countless hours of practice. From the VIP section, Congressman Mitchell watched with undisguised interest, his earlier impatience replaced by genuine engagement. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Peterson fidgeted nervously, her clipboard forgotten, as she stared intently at the firing line. "Remarkable that she's even attempting this course with that weapon," Mitchell commented. "The M14 wasn't designed for this type of engagement. It's completely unsuited to the task," Peterson agreed, a hint of her earlier dismissiveness returning. "The first round might have been impressive, but this will expose the limitations of outdated technology against modern systems." At that moment, Morgan did something unexpected. As the range officer called for final preparations, she removed her field jacket again, but this time she also pulled off her worn baseball cap. Her dark hair, streaked with premature grey, fell to her shoulders as she adjusted her stance. Then, most surprisingly, she closed her eyes. Murmurs spread through the crowd as Morgan stood perfectly still, eyes closed, seemingly meditating while other competitors made last-minute adjustments to their equipment. Captain Reynolds glanced over, his expression a mixture of confusion and disdain. "What is she doing?" Someone whispered loudly enough to be heard across several rows. "Praying for a miracle," came a sarcastic response, triggering nervous laughter. But Staff Sergeant Martinez, observing from her position as a range safety officer, recognized what was happening. "She's not praying," she said quietly to the nearby officials. "She's calibrating." "Calibrating what?" asked a puzzled junior officer. "Herself," Martinez replied. "When you don't have technology to rely on, you learn to use your other senses. She's feeling the wind, listening to how it moves across the range, preparing her body to react instinctively." The range officer's voice cut through the speculation. "Shooters ready. Stand by." Morgan opened her eyes and something had changed in her demeanor. The quiet, reserved veteran was gone, replaced by a focused predator whose stillness carried an almost tangible intensity. Her hands cradled the M14 with the intimate familiarity of a relationship forged through years of shared experience in the harshest conditions imaginable. The buzzer sounded, and the second course of fire began. The first target appeared with mechanical Precision, a human-shaped silhouette emerging from behind a barrier 250 meters downrange. It began moving laterally at a moderate pace, visible for only the promised 3 seconds before disappearing behind another barrier. Captain Reynolds and his team engaged immediately, their rifles cracking in quick succession. Digital displays registered hits for most of the Marine shooters, their advanced optics allowing them to track and lead the moving target effectively. Morgan's shot came a fraction of a second later, a single deliberate report that echoed differently from the Marines' suppressed weapons. The digital display registered her hit dead center of the target's chest area. The second target appeared almost immediately at 175 meters, moving faster than the first. Again, the Marines engaged quickly with professional precision. Again, Morgan's single shot followed, hitting with unerring accuracy. By the fifth target, a small silhouette sprinting at 320 meters, a pattern had emerged that was impossible to ignore. Where the Marines were achieving solid hits using their advanced systems, Morgan was placing each shot with surgical precision, despite using only iron sights on a rifle designed before most of the spectators were born. She didn't fire as quickly as the others, but her timing was impeccable, each shot finding its mark in the highest value target zone. "This is impossible," muttered Lieutenant Commander Peterson, her composure cracking as she watched the digital scoreboard update with each successful engagement. She can't be outperforming advanced combat optics with Vietnam-era iron sights. Beside her, Congressman Mitchell's aide leaned forward and whispered, "She's not just hitting the target, sir. Look at the placement. Every shot is center mass or head. The Marines are getting good hits, but scattered across the scoring zones. In the bleachers, the crowd had fallen completely silent, the only sounds the crack of rifles and the mechanical whir of the target systems. Phones remained raised, recording what was rapidly becoming something many would later describe as nearly supernatural marksmanship. The eighth target appeared at maximum range, 400 meters, moving in an erratic pattern designed to simulate a running combatant. Captain Reynolds tracked it smoothly with his advanced scope, firing twice and registering solid hits on the target's shoulder and torso. His team followed with similar results, effective hits, though scattered across various scoring zones. Morgan's approach was visibly different. Instead of tracking the target continuously, she held perfectly still, waiting as the silhouette moved through its programmed pattern. Then, at a moment when the target's movement briefly steadied during a directional change, she fired a single shot. The digital display registered a perfect headshot, triggering audible gasps from several spectators. "That's not possible," Sergeant Wilson whispered to his teammate, momentarily breaking concentration. "Not at that distance, with iron sights on a moving target." "Focus on your own shooting," Captain Reynolds snapped. His earlier confidence completely evaporated, replaced by the intense concentration of someone fighting to maintain control of a situation rapidly slipping away. The final target appeared without warning, a half-size silhouette at 300 meters moving at variable speeds with unpredictable stops and starts. This was the course's notorious final boss, designed to separate good shooters from exceptional ones. The Marines engaged professionally, most hitting the difficult target, though their shots dispersed across its surface. Morgan watched the target's movement for a full second, her body completely still, except for the barely perceptible rhythm of her controlled breathing. When she fired, it was during one of the target's brief, random pauses. The shot struck precisely where the center of the head would be on a human-sized target, a demonstration of marksmanship so precise that even the most skeptical observers could not deny its mastery. "Cease fire, cease fire," called the range officer, as the final target disappeared. "Clear and secure your weapons." A strange silence fell over the range, broken only by the metallic sounds of weapons being cleared and made safe. Captain Reynolds stood rigid at his station, his expression unreadable as he mechanically completed the safety procedures. His team exchanged glances that mixed disbelief with grudging respect. Chief Gaines approached the firing line with the official scoring tablet, his earlier disdain replaced by professional neutrality. "Results from Course 2, moving target engagement," he announced, voice carrying across the now silent range. He read through the Marines' scores first, all excellent by any standard, ranging from 85 to 92 points out of 100 possible. Captain Reynolds scored 92, the highest among his team. "Lieutenant Hayes," Chief Gaines continued, pausing almost imperceptibly before reading her score. 98 points. The silence deepened, transforming into something almost physical in its intensity. Then, from somewhere in the back of the bleachers, a single person began to clap. The sound was joined by another, then another, building into genuine applause that spread through the spectator area. In the VIP section, Congressman Mitchell turned to Lieutenant Commander Peterson with raised eyebrows. "I think we're witnessing something remarkable here," he said, his tone suggesting he'd already made decisions about the funding that had ostensibly been at stake. Peterson nodded stiffly, her clipboard forgotten in her lap. "Yes, sir, it appears we are." On the firing line, Morgan methodically cleaned her M14 before returning it to its case, her movements unhurried and precise. She acknowledged neither the applause nor the stares fixed on her from every direction. Her focus remained entirely on her weapon and the care it required after use. Staff Sergeant Martinez approached, maintaining a professional distance but close enough to speak privately. "That was the finest shooting I've seen in 15 years of range instruction," she said quietly. "Your father would be proud." Morgan looked up briefly, the first genuine emotion flashing across her features, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, more personal. She nodded once in acknowledgement before returning to her task. Captain Reynolds had been watching this exchange from his position. After a visible internal struggle, he approached Morgan's station. His team hesitated, then followed a few steps. Behind, their earlier mockery replaced by the kind of respectful caution typically reserved for approaching a superior officer. "Lieutenant Hayes," Reynolds began, his voice formal but not hostile, "that was unexpected shooting." Morgan secured her rifle in its case before responding. "Thank you, Captain. I'd be interested to know where you learned to shoot like that," he continued, genuine curiosity breaking through his professional veneer. "That kind of skill doesn't come from standard military training." Morgan stood facing Reynolds directly for the first time. The contrast between them remained stark, his pristine uniform and state-of-the-art equipment against her worn fatigues and vintage rifle. But the dynamic had fundamentally changed. Where before he had looked at her with dismissive amusement, now he regarded her with the wary respect of a predator recognizing another apex hunter. "No, it doesn't," she agreed simply. "It comes from necessity." Before Reynolds could respond, Major Blackwood's voice came over the PA system. "Attention all personnel. Final course of fire will commence in 30 minutes. Competitors, report." "For briefing." The briefing room buzzed with subdued conversation as competitors gathered for instructions on the final course of fire. The atmosphere had transformed completely. Where Morgan had earlier been isolated and ignored, now other shooters maintained a respectful distance, stealing glances when they thought she wouldn't notice. The whispers were no longer mocking but speculative, theorizing about her background and training. Major Blackwood entered, accompanied by Chief Gaines and Lieutenant Commander Peterson. The room immediately fell silent as competitors rose to attention. "At ease," Blackwood instructed, surveying the assembled shooters with practiced authority. "The final course will test the ultimate measure of combat marksmanship, performance under stress and adverse conditions." He nodded to Chief Gaines, who activated a large screen displaying a complex range layout. "The stress course combines physical exertion, limited visibility, and environmental challenges, Gaines explained. Competitors will navigate a 400-meter obstacle course carrying full combat load. Upon reaching the firing position, they must engage targets through simulated battlefield conditions, including smoke, variable lighting, and disorienting sound effects. Morgan studied the course diagram with focused intensity, mentally calculating angles and sightlines. While the other competitors had likely trained on similar layouts at Camp Blackwater, this would be her first time encountering this specific configuration. That disadvantage would compound the already significant challenge of running an obstacle course designed for shooters half her age. Scoring will combine completion time with shooting accuracy, Lieutenant Commander Peterson added, her tone professionally neutral, though her eyes briefly flickered toward Morgan. 10 targets at varying distances, some visible only for fractions of a second. Perfect score requires hits in critical zones under night vision conditions for the final 3 targets. Captain Reynolds and his team exchanged confident glances. This course heavily favored their advanced equipment, particularly their thermal scopes and night vision capabilities. The M14, with its iron sights and heavier weight, would be at a severe disadvantage in the smoky, dark conditions of the final. "Shooting stage? Any questions?" Blackwood asked, surveying the room. Morgan raised her hand, the first time she had voluntarily drawn attention to herself since arriving at Camp Blackwater. "Sir, are suppressors permitted for this course?" The question seemed to surprise Blackwood. "Suppressors are standard for the nightfire portion. Your weapon doesn't appear to be equipped with one, Lieutenant Hayes." "I have one in my kit," Morgan replied evenly. "Custom-fitted for the M14. I'd like permission to install it for this." "Course." Reynolds smirked slightly at this, the first familiar expression he'd shown since being outshot in the previous rounds. Even a custom suppressor wouldn't compensate for the M14's inherent limitations in the stress course. The final victory, he clearly believed, would still belong to modern technology and youth. "Permission granted," Blackwood confirmed, after a brief consultation with Chief Gaines. "Competitors will begin in reverse order of current standing. Based on combined scores from the previous courses, Lieutenant Hayes will run last." This announcement triggered another wave of whispers. Running last meant Morgan would witness everyone else's performance before attempting the course herself, a significant advantage that acknowledged her current lead in the competition. As the briefing concluded, competitors dispersed to prepare for the final challenge. Morgan retrieved her gear bag from the preparation area and withdrew a specialized suppressor, its design noticeably different from the standardized models used by the Marines. Like everything else associated with her equipment, it had a well-worn appearance that suggested years of actual field use rather than range practice. While making her modifications, Morgan became aware of Captain Reynolds watching her from across the preparation area. After a moment's hesitation, he approached, his curiosity evidently overcoming his pride. "That's not a standard-issue suppressor," he observed, studying the device as Morgan carefully attached it to her M14's barrel. "No, it's not," she agreed, without elaboration, continuing her work with practiced efficiency. Reynolds waited for further explanation, but when none came, he pressed, "Mind if I ask where you got it?" Morgan tightened the final fitting before looking up. "Kandahar Province, 2011. We were operating deep in contested territory, tracking a high-value target. Standard suppressors were failing under extended use in the dust and heat. Our unit armorer modified this design based on Russian prototypes we'd encountered. Better heat dissipation, less point-of-impact shift, maintains effectiveness after hundreds of rounds." The casual reference to classified operations hung in the air between them. Reynolds's expression shifted as he began to recalibrate his assessment. "Of the woman before him, you weren't just regular army, were you?" he asked quietly. Morgan returned the specialized tools to her kit, her movements methodical and unhurried. My service record says I was. The implication was clear. Some military. Histories existed only in classified files with sanitized versions available for public records. Before Reynolds could respond, Staff Sergeant Martinez approached. "Lieutenant Hayes, they're requesting you at the medical tent for the pre-course physical assessment." Morgan nodded, securing her rifle before standing to leave. As she passed, "Reynolds," she paused briefly. "Good luck on the course, Captain. Your team shoots well." The compliment, delivered without condescension, seemed to catch Reynolds off guard. He nodded in acknowledgement, watching as Morgan followed Martinez toward the medical station. "She's Task Force Orange," whispered Corporal Rodriguez once Morgan was out of earshot, referring to the rumored elite unit that operated under multiple layers of classification. "Has to be. My cousin worked support for them in Afghanistan, said they had custom gear and moved differently than regular special forces." Reynolds shook his head, not confirming or denying the speculation. His focus had shifted entirely to the upcoming stress course, his last opportunity to overcome the unexpected. Challenge posed by a woman with an ancient rifle and skills that defied easy explanation. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Camp Blackwater as range crews prepared the final course. Smoke generators were tested, creating billowing clouds that would obscure sections of the range. Lighting systems were calibrated to create the strobe effects and sudden darkness that would disorient shooters. The obstacle course, a grueling gauntlet of walls, ditches and confined spaces, stood ready to exhaust competitors before they ever reached the firing position. In the spectator area, the atmosphere had transformed into the tense anticipation of a championship sporting event. The bleachers were now filled to capacity, with additional personnel standing along the perimeter. The unofficial betting board had been completely rewritten, with odds now favoring the mysterious veteran over the elite recon team. Congressman Mitchell had moved from the VIP section to stand near the course exit point, his interest in the proceedings now genuine rather than perfunctory. Beside him, his aide was speaking quietly into a secure phone, apparently making inquiries about Lieutenant Morgan Hayes and her service record. "Sir," the aide said, covering the phone's microphone, "most of her file is redacted under national security provisions, but I've confirmed she served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Syria, received the Silver Star and Purple Heart, then worked as an advanced marksmanship instructor until medically discharged in 2021. Mitchell nodded thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the medical tent where Morgan was undergoing her assessment. "And the Veterans Outreach Program she's representing today? She founded it, sir, uses her military pension to help fund it. They provide specialized support for combat veterans with PTSD and physical injuries, particularly those who fell through the cracks in the standard VA system." The congressman's expression softened with this information. As a career politician, he recognized a compelling narrative when he saw one. Regardless of the final outcome, the story of a combat-scarred veteran returning to outshoot active duty, specialist with her father's rifle, had already captured the imagination of everyone present. Over the PA system, Major Blackwood's voice announced, "First competitor will begin the stress course in 5 minutes. Spectators are reminded to maintain silence during the night fire portion of the exercise." The stress course transformed Camp Blackwater's precision range into a battlefield simulation that assaulted all senses simultaneously. Smoke machines pumped thick artificial fog across sections of the course, obscuring both obstacles and targets. Speakers mounted on poles broadcast the chaotic sounds of combat, explosions, shouted orders, helicopter rotors, and the distinctive crack of incoming fire. Strobe lights disoriented competitors as they transitioned from daylight to near-complete darkness in the final shooting stage. The Marine team attacked the course with the aggressive efficiency that had made Force Recon legendary among military units. Each member completed the physically demanding obstacle portion within minutes, their movements displaying the peak conditioning expected of elite operators. Upon reaching the firing positions, they engaged targets with textbook precision despite the challenging conditions. Captain Reynolds set the standard for his team, navigating the obstacles with fluid speed before engaging all 10 targets successfully. His final time of 6:42, with a shooting score of 94, established what seemed like an unbeatable benchmark. His teammates posted similar impressive performances, their scores clustering in the low 90s with completion times under 7 minutes. As each Marine finished, they joined the growing crowd of spectators waiting for the final competitor. The sun had set completely now, the course illuminated only by tactical lighting that created more shadows than visibility. Perfect conditions for modern night vision equipment, and seemingly impossible for iron sights. When Morgan's turn finally came, the entire base had fallen silent with anticipation. She approached the starting line dressed differently than before. Gone were the worn BDUs, replaced by what appeared to be elements of specialized combat gear, lightweight tactical pants, a moisture-wicking combat shirt, and a minimal plate carrier. Most noticeable was her footwear, instead of standard military boots. She wore trail-running shoes with aggressive tread patterns. Her M14, now fitted with the specialized suppressor, was secured across her back with a custom single-point sling that would allow quick deployment while moving. The transformation was subtle but significant. This was no longer a veteran showing up with outdated equipment, but a professional who had carefully optimized her kit for the specific challenges ahead. The gear, like her rifle, showed signs of extensive field use rather than being fresh from supply. Final competitor, Lieutenant Morgan Hayes, Veterans Outreach Program, announced Major Blackwood. Course is hot in 3, 2, 1. The buzzer sounded, and Morgan exploded from the starting position with unexpected speed. Where the Marines had attacked the obstacle course with youthful power and aggression, she moved with the calculated efficiency of someone who had learned to conserve energy through years of experience. Her path through the obstacles revealed intimate familiarity with combat movement. She took optimal angles, used momentum rather than raw strength, and never wasted motion. "She's not just fast, she's smart," observed Staff Sergeant Martinez to the range officers beside her. "Look at her line through the obstacles. She's minimizing distance and exposure time simultaneously." Morgan cleared the physically demanding first half of the course in a time that rivaled the youngest Marines. As she approached the firing position, she unslung her M14 with practiced fluidity, the transition from movement to shooting stance seamless. The first targets appeared through the artificial smoke, illuminated by the unpredictable flashing of the strobe lights. What happened next drew audible reactions from the assembled spectators. Where the Marines had engaged each target methodically, Morgan's approach appeared almost prescient. She fired at locations an instant before targets appeared, her shots finding center mass as the silhouettes emerged from concealment. It was as if she were predicting the course rather than reacting to it. "That's impossible," whispered Sergeant Wilson, watching through binoculars. "She's anticipating the target sequence. She memorized the pattern from watching us," Reynolds realized aloud, professional respect evident in his voice despite his competitive frustration. As Morgan progressed to the night fire portion of the course, she did something that caused murmurs to ripple through the crowd. Instead of switching to the night vision goggles provided at the transition point, she pulled a black bandana from her pocket and tied it around her eyes. "What the hell is she doing?" someone gasped. "She's blindfolding herself." In the VIP section, Lieutenant Commander Peterson turned to Chief Gaines in shock. "Is that allowed? Should we stop the exercise?" Chief Gaines checked the rulebook briefly before responding. There's no regulation against it. Night vision equipment is authorized, but not required. Morgan moved forward with the blindfold secured, tightly around her eyes, navigating solely by sound and memory. Her breathing pattern changed noticeably, becoming deeper and more rhythmic as she entered what appeared to be a state of intense concentration. When the final 3 targets appeared in near-total darkness, she fired with the same unerring accuracy she had demonstrated throughout the competition. The digital scoreboard confirmed what the stunned spectators were witnessing: perfect hits on targets that were barely visible even with night vision equipment. Morgan completed the final station, removed her blindfold, and secured her weapon before walking calmly to the course exit. Major Blackwood stared at the timing display, then at the shooting score compilation, before clearing his throat to make the announcement. Final competitor time 6:17, shooting score 100 points, perfect score. The silence that followed lasted only seconds before erupting into applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of Camp Blackwater. Marines who had begun the day mocking the veteran with the ancient rifle now stood in spontaneous recognition of marksmanship that defied conventional explanation. Morgan walked past the applauding crowd without acknowledgement, returning directly to her preparation area, where she immediately began breaking down her rifle for cleaning. The ritual was clearly more important to her than the accolades echoing across the range. Captain Reynolds watched her from a distance, his expression a complex mixture of professional admiration and competitive frustration. After a brief discussion with his team, he approached Morgan's table, followed by his recon unit walking in formation behind him. Captain Reynolds stopped at a respectful distance from Morgan's table, his team arrayed behind him in a formal line. The contrast between their pristine uniforms and her sweat-soaked combat shirt highlighted the different paths they had taken to reach this moment. Reynolds cleared his throat, the sound drawing Morgan's attention from her meticulous cleaning of the M14's bolt assembly. "Lieutenant Hayes," he began, his voice carrying the formal tone of official military address. "On behalf of Force Recon, Sniper Unit Alpha, I'd like to extend our professional respect and congratulations on your performance today." Morgan set down her cleaning rod and stood, meeting Reynolds' gaze directly. For a moment she said nothing, evaluating the sincerity of his words. Then she nodded once, accepting the gesture for what it was, a warrior's acknowledgement of superior skill. "Your team shoots well, Captain," she replied simply. "They'll be even better when they learn that the weapon is just a tool. The real instrument of precision is the person behind it." Reynolds absorbed this subtle critique without defensiveness, a sign of his own professional growth in the span of a single day. "If you're ever interested in running a master class for our unit, we'd consider it an honor." Before Morgan could respond, the crowd parted as Congressman Mitchell approached, accompanied by Major Blackwood and several high-ranking officers. The politician's practiced smile seemed genuinely warm as he extended his hand. "Lieutenant Hayes, that was the most extraordinary display of marksmanship I've witnessed in 30 years of military appropriations oversight," Mitchell said, grasping her hand firmly. "I think it's safe to say the Veterans Outreach Program has secured its funding for the foreseeable future." Morgan accepted this news with the same calm she had maintained throughout the day, though those watching closely might have noticed a slight relaxation in her shoulders, the first sign that the day's stakes had meant more to her than she had let on. "Thank you, Congressman. Those funds will help a lot of veterans who've fallen through the cracks in our system." Mitchell nodded, his political instincts recognizing a powerful narrative when he saw one. "I'd like to hear more about your program. Perhaps a briefing to the full committee next month in Washington. Your demonstration today makes a compelling case for expanding veteran support services." As this conversation continued, Staff Sergeant Martinez had approached Morgan's table and was examining the M14 with professional interest. She lifted the rifle with proper respect, studying the modifications and wear patterns that told the story. Of countless rounds fired in training and combat, this wasn't just your father's rifle, was it? She asked quietly when Morgan returned her attention to the table. This was his from Vietnam, but it was also yours in Afghanistan and Syria. The wear patterns are from two different generations of combat. Morgan took the rifle gently from Martinez's hands, her fingers automatically finding the small notches carved into the wooden stock, 23 marks made with the point of a combat knife. My father made the first 8 notches, she confirmed, her voice low enough that only Martinez could hear. The rest came later, in places I'm still not permitted to discuss. Each one represents a life saved, not taken. That's what he taught me. The purpose of mastering a weapon is to protect those who can't protect themselves. Martinez nodded in understanding, recognizing the philosophy of a true guardian rather than simply a skilled killer. Your father would be proud of what you did here today, not just the shooting, but what it will mean for other veterans. For the first time, Morgan's stoic expression softened into something approaching a smile. He used to say that battles don't end when the shooting stops. Sometimes the hardest fights come after you leave the field. Their conversation was interrupted as Major Blackwood called for attention. The assembled personnel came to order as he prepared to make a formal announcement. Based on today's performance, it is my privilege to declare Lieutenant Morgan Hayes the overall champion of the annual marksmanship qualification event, Blackwood stated, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect. Her scores will be recorded in Camp Blackwater's Hall of Records, and her name added to the permanent trophy. The applause that followed was unanimous and heartfelt. Even Captain Reynolds and his team joined with genuine enthusiasm, their initial mockery now a distant memory replaced by professional admiration. As the formal ceremony concluded, Morgan finished packing her rifle and equipment. The day's demonstration had accomplished its purpose, securing funding for a program that would help hundreds of veterans struggling with the aftermath of combat. Now she was ready to return to that work, away from the spotlight and ceremony. Before she could leave, however, a young Marine approached hesitantly. He couldn't have been more than 20, his face still bearing the softness of youth despite his military bearing. "Lieutenant Hayes," he began nervously, "I just wanted to say, my older brother came back from his second tour last year. He hasn't been the same since. Nightmares, can't hold a job, barely leaves his apartment. Your Veterans Outreach program has been helping him. The counseling, the peer support groups, he's finally starting to find his way back." The young Marine straightened to attention. "I just wanted to say thank you, ma'am, not just for what you did here today, but for what you do every day." Morgan set down her case and returned his salute with formal precision. "What's your brother's name, Marine?" "Michael Rivera, ma'am. He served with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines in Helmand Province." Morgan nodded. "I know the program counselor who works with that group. I'll check in on him personally when I get back." The genuine gratitude in the young Marine's eyes was worth more than all the day's accolades combined. This, not the shooting trophies or competition victories, was why Morgan had founded the Outreach program, and why she had put herself through today's public challenge. As the sun set over Camp Blackwater, Morgan Hayes loaded her rifle case into her battered pickup truck and drove away without fanfare or ceremony. Behind her, the Marines who had begun the day mocking her ancient rifle now stood discussing what they had witnessed, already transforming the day's events into the kind of legend that would be repeated in barracks and training facilities for years to come. 3 weeks after Morgan's performance at Camp Blackwater, the shooting world was still processing what had occurred. Video of the competition, particularly the blindfolded nightfire stage, had spread through military and law enforcement channels, generating debate and disbelief in equal measure. Shooting forums were filled with analysis of her technique, equipment discussions debating the merits of experience over technology, and countless threads attempting to uncover more details about the mysterious veteran who had outshot America's most elite snipers with her father's rifle. At a modest office building in Kentucky, Morgan continued her real work, counseling veterans, coordinating support services, and fighting the bureaucratic battles necessary to ensure those who had served received the care they deserved. The promised funding had arrived, allowing their Veterans Outreach Program to expand its services to 3 additional states. On her desk sat a framed photograph of her father in his Vietnam-era uniform, an M14 rifle held across his chest, his expression serious, but his eyes kind. Beside it now stood a new addition, the championship trophy from Camp Blackwater, its engraved plate reading simply, Lieutenant Morgan Hayes, perfect score, 2025. Captain Reynolds had kept his word. 2 months after the competition, he had arranged for his entire team to attend a specialized training session led by Morgan, where she taught them the fundamentals that technology could never replace: breath control, mental discipline, and the intimate understanding of ballistics that comes only from thousands of hours behind a rifle. The Marines, who had once mocked her, now listened with the rapt attention of students privileged to learn from a master. "The weapon is just a tool," she had told them, echoing her words from the competition day. "Learn to shoot with your mind. First, your body second, and the rifle third. Do that, and it won't matter if your equipment fails or technology lets you down. You'll still find your target, because the true instrument of precision is the person behind the gun." The legend of the veteran who outshot an entire Marine unit with her ancient rifle continues to spread, inspiring a new generation of marksmen to master the fundamentals before relying on technology. More importantly, it opened doors and secured resources for thousands of veterans fighting battles long after leaving the battlefield, proving once again that sometimes the most important victories are won far from the public eye, by those whose quiet skill speaks louder than any boast. If this story of overcoming doubters and defying expectations resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of extraordinary individuals proving their worth against all odds. Have you ever been underestimated, only to shock everyone with your hidden talents? Share your experiences in the comments below. Next week, we'll bring you the remarkable story of a rural math teacher who stunned MIT professors with his revolutionary approach to quantum calculations, all developed without a computer in a one-room schoolhouse in Appalachia. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss these powerful stories of unexpected excellence that remind us all never to judge a book by its cover or a shooter by her rifle. Remember, in a world that's quick to dismiss the old, the different, or the unexpected, sometimes the most powerful statement is simply showing up and letting your skills speak for themselves. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.